Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me. I am still tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It is still in the description below. Your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any of our platforms. Please reach out to me directly for pricing. I am tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Today we are discussing a 2019 limited edition of 25 pieces in grade 5 titanium from Czapek. This is the Vendome Tourbillon Titanium Ombres. It is dedicated to shadows, the light and the dark. A tourbillon with a second time zone and a beautiful Champlevé Grand Faux subdial. It is a large but wearable 43.5 millimeters in diameter, 13.9 millimeters thick, and from lug tip to lug tip, 50.8 millimeters across the wrist with a 22 millimeter spacing between the lugs. Now you can see the shape of the case. It actually just sort of wrap around the edge of your wrist. And frankly, 50.8 millimeters lug to lug is pretty compact for a 43.5 millimeter case. So on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, this wears really nicely. It's not super thick either, being just under 14 millimeters. It's a nice number for clearing a cuff. And with a sloped bezel and a domed sapphire, it will actually slide underneath a lot of sleeves. I believe you could wear this on a wrist of my size or larger. And again, because it's mostly titanium and sapphire, it is super light and extremely comfortable. The strap is upscale, as you can see, black, semi-gloss, large rectangular scale alligator leather. We've got a folded edge, a monotone stitch, a little bit of bolstering to give it some volume on the bottom. You can see Czapek factory strap with a rubber inlay to separate the leather from the moisture, sweat, heat, and grit of the wrist so the leather will last longer. We have pull tab spring bars so you can quickly pop the strap off the case without a tool. And then we have a buckle that is Czapek branded. You can see it features satin and polish in profile, and then some media blast on the bottom. And there's a little recess in the buckle for the pin, a detail I happen to enjoy greatly. You can also see it has an elevated bridge. So the bridge in the center is elevated, so the strap sits more flush inside it when the two are interlocked on the wrist. You can also see that the lugs have been drilled fairly close to the case so that the pivot centers of the strap are as far inboard as possible for good fit on a smaller wrist. And in order to prevent any limitation on the range of motion of the strap, a curved spring bar has been used here. It's a fascinating case. As you can see, the flanks are evacuated and media blasted. We then have the outermost lateral profile of the case satinated. Then the lug hoods as well as the conical portion of the bezel are polished. You can actually see the upright portion of the bezel outboard. That has been satin finished around its narrow lip. And you can see that the lugs actually ride up halfway across that satinated lip so that the lugs don't get cropped by the bezel. If the bezel were sitting on top of the lugs might appear a little bit too short and cropped, whereas allowing the lugs to ride up the side, it's a common trick watch designers use to have a thinner watch but also full and beautiful lug profiles. Now, grade 5 titanium's the good stuff. It's lighter than steel and hypoallergenic like grade 2. Unlike grade 2, it can be polished and it's harder and more scratch resistant than steel. We have some little guard profiles for the crown. These aren't true crown guards. It's more like a balancing element, a sheer guard at best. Really, it's aesthetic, and it's designed to counterbalance the pusher that allows you to set the secondary time zone. We have the Czapek 1845. Of course, Czapek and Patek, once upon a time, famous business partners. Patek went on to join with Jean-Adrien Philippe and create Patek Philippe, and Czapek struck out on his own in the middle of the 1840s and created Czapek, which was revived in the 2010s to create the watch you see here, among others. Now, the watch that we've got is actually quite complex. We'll start with the showpiece, the shadow style dial. Now, this is Champlevé, which is to say the dial ring has been scooped out manually, and then through multiple firings and applications of glass-based paint or vitreous enamel, it has been coated and fired to create this lovely, glossy, gleaming Grand Faux enamel, which is eternal. It doesn't tarnish, oxidize, and it is a difficult thing to create as the rejection rate is high on this, as the dial can fracture at any time or even explode in the oven during the upwards of 20 firings required for Grand Faux. And the attention to detail is superb. You can see here the numeral font used for the 1 and the 2, clearly the same as used on the secondary time zone register. So a lot of thought went into this. We will take a quick look at the watch in the dark just to confirm, for those of you who might have suspicions, that this version of the Place Vendome Tourbillon is luminescent. Not all versions are. And then we've got the secondary time zone, and it's in a 12-hour format, but we have a day-night indicator adjacent, so you know whether you're looking, for example, at 6 in the evening or 6 in the morning. And the little index with the day and the night and the stars and the moon will let you know. Now, the dial is very similar to the movement in that it features a media blasted frosted finish and then well-chosen beveling. You can see on the edge of these individual planes of the dial, there's quite a bit of thought given to finish. And turning it over, you can see the same has been lavished on the back, and particularly these bevels are nicely mirrored and handsomely polished, and the frosted finish more evocative of something that would have been made in the era of Czapek, as back in the 1840s, Côte de Genève would not have been something used on a pocket watch of the time. That would have come later. So back on the dial side, you can see all screw heads are black polished, which I love. The hands are made of white gold and polished. Like the enamel, they will never tarnish or oxidize with time. We have a nicely balanced dial, as we've got the tourbillon, the dial itself, the secondary time zone, and then if you look, we have a power reserve indicator for the manual wind 60-hour power reserve, and that lives just underneath the hands up at the top, and you can see has been lacquer filled. We have the tourbillon, which is free sprung, adjusted in chronometer style 5 positions. It is a 1-minute tourbillon. It beats away at 21,600 vibrations per hour. I would say part for part and millimeter for millimeter is probably the best finished part of the entire watch. So the detailing here really designed to please. You can also see how the dial itself floats above the base of the watch face. So there is the watch face, truthfully, and then there's the dial itself. You'll also note there's a blue screw in the tourbillon that acts effectively as your seconds hand, and then there is a polished chaptering inside the tourbillon that's actually calibrated to act as your seconds scale. The bridge for the tourbillon has been entirely mirror polished across its top and beveled internally and externally, with a combination of satination on the top of the tourbillon carriage and beveling on all of those filigree or wire style elements. Now, turning it all over, it's a good look at the dial side. Again, I really like the lacquer infill and the media blast of the secondary time zone, which has the same sort of bridge decoration as the tourbillon, but you'll also note that its center is satinated. Turning it all over. Okay. Single barrel, 60 hours of power reserve. You can see this was the second movement designed by Chronode, which was the movement specialist working with Czapek on these watches, as Czapek is proudly an établisseur. They order the best parts, they specify what they want for their distinctive product, and then it arrives and it is assembled and regulated in the grand tradition that was, for 250 years, the only way Vacheron Constantin made anything prior to the 21st century. So this is a time-honored tradition. It is how Czapek would have made pocket watches back in the day. If you go on Czapek's website, they'll actually name their collaborators, which is remarkably refreshing and honest. We have satination on the train wheels. You can see we have satination on the crown wheel core, and then the edges are polished. We have a ratchet wheel that's been skeletonized, satinated on its top with polished teeth, and then you can see the interior hollows have been beveled, which I always love to see. All this is 30 meters water resistant. You can see titanium. This is 25 of 25, so if you guys are always interested in distinctive or significant serial numbers on limited editions you own, this is a great one. The first and the last are always great serials to own. And you can see a 35 jewel movement. It nicely fills the case back. It is quite large, being 34.8 millimeters, highlighting the benefit of working with a movement partner like Chronode, which can design a new movement specifically to suit your watch, as opposed to going out to a legacy provider like a Lamagna or Frederico Patrick Piguet or an ETA or Solita, where they're going to supply you with an existing version of an existing caliber, and there may be a huge movement space, or it might not be a good match case size to movement size. Doing everything custom for the intended product is the way to go. And of course, lots to love with details that will continue to reveal themselves the longer you own the watch. If you love this watch, reach out to me. I am Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.